The fuck is that?
All right. I think that's recording 34. Introduction still. Let me get a sip of coffee. Fuck. Excuse me. In the associationalism of Hartley and Hume was advanced the theory that the association of ideas is a fundamental principle of psychology and the explanation for all mental phenomena. Hartley held that if a sensation be repeated several times, there is a tendency towards the spontaneous repetition which may be awakened by association with some other idea, even though the object causing the original reaction is absent. The utilitarianism of Jeremy Bentham, Archdeacon Paley, and James and John Stuart Mill declares that to be the greatest good which is the most useful to the greatest number. John Stuart Mill believed that if it is possible through sensation to secure knowledge of the properties of things, it is also possible through a higher state of the mind, that is, intuition or reason, to gain a knowledge of the true substance of things. Darwinism is the doctrine of natural selection and physical evolution. It has been said of Charles Robert Darwin that he determined to banish spirit altogether from the universe and make the infinite and omnipresent mind itself synonymous with the all-pervading powers of an impersonal nature. Agnosticism, and neo-Hegelianism are also noteworthy products of this period of philosophic thought. The former is the belief that the nature of ultimates is unknowable, the latter an English and American revival of Hegel's idealism. Dr. W.J. Durant declares that Herbert Spencer's great work, First Principles, made him almost at once the most famous philosopher of his time. Spencerianism is a philosophic positivism which describes evolution as an ever-increasing complexity with equilibrium of its highest possible state. According to Spencer, life is a continuous process from homogeneity to heterogeneity and back from heterogeneity to homogeneity. Life also involves the continual adjustment of internal relations to external relations. Most famous of all Spencer's aphorisms is his definition of deity. God is infinite intelligence, infinitely diversified through infinite time and infinite space, manifesting through an infinitude of ever-evolving individualities. The universality of the law of evolution was emphasized by Spencer, who applied it not only to the form, but also to the intelligence behind the form. In every manifestation of being, he recognized the fundamental tendency of unfoldment from simplicity to complexity, observing that when the point of equilibrium is reached, it is always followed by the process of dissolution. According to Spencer, however, disintegration took place only that reintegration might follow upon a higher level of being. The chief position in the Italian school of philosophy should be awarded to Giordano Bruno, who, after enthusiastically accepting Copernicus' theory that the sun is the center of the solar system, declared the sun to be a star and all the stars to be suns. In Bruno's time, the earth was regarded as the center of all creation. Consequently, when he thus relegated the world and man to an obscure corner in space, the effect was cataclysmic. For the heresy of affirming a multiplicity of universes and conceiving cosmos to be so vast that no single creed could fill it, Bruno paid the forfeit of his life. Vicoism is a philosophy based upon the conclusions of Giovanni Battista Vico, who held that God controls his world not miraculously but through natural law. The laws by which men rule themselves, Vico declared, issue from a spiritual source within mankind which is en rapport with the law of the deity. Hence, material law is of divine origin and reflects the dictates of the spiritual father. The philosophy of ontologism, developed by Vincenzo Ghiberti, generally considered more as a theologian than a philosopher, posits God as the only being and the origin of all knowledge, knowledge being identical with deity itself. God is consequently called being. All other manifestations are existences. Truth is to be discovered through reflection upon this mystery. The most important of modern Italian philosophers is Benedetto Croce, a Hegelian idealist. Croce conceives ideas to be the only reality. He is anti-theological in his viewpoints, does not believe in the immortality of the soul, and seeks to substitute ethics and aesthetics for religion. Among other branches of Italian philosophy should be mentioned sensationalism, which posits the sense perceptions as the sole channels for the reception of knowledge, criticism, or the philosophy of accurate judgment, and neo-scholasticism, which is a revival of Thomisms encouraged by the Roman Catholic Church. The two outstanding schools of American philosophy are Transcendentalism and Pragmatism. Transcendentalism, exemplifies in the writings of Ralph Waldo Emerson, emphasizes the power of the transcendental over the physical. Many of Emerson's writings show pronounced Oriental influence, particularly his essays on the Oversoul and the Law of Compensation. The theory of pragmatism, while not original with Professor William James, owes its widespread popularity as a philosophic tenet to his efforts. Pragmatism may be defined as the doctrine that the meaning and nature of things are to be discovered from consideration of their consequences. The true, according to James, is only an expedient in the way of our thinking, just as the right is only an expedient in the way of our behaving. See his pragmatism. John Dewey, the instrumentalist, who applies the experimental attitude to all the aims of life, should be considered a commentator of James. To Dewey, growth and change are limitless, and no ultimates are postulated. The long residence in America of George Santayana warrants the listing of this great Spaniard among the ranks of American philosophers, defending himself with the shield of skepticism alike from the illusions of the senses and the cumulative errors of the ages. Santayana seeks to lead mankind to a more apprehending state, denominated by him the life of reason. In addition to the authorities already quoted, in the preparation of the foregoing abstract of the main branches of philosophic thought, the present writer has had recourse to Stanley's History of Philosophy, Morel's an historical and critical view of the speculative philosophy of Europe in the 19th century, Singer's Modern Thinkers and Present Problems, Rand's Modern Classical Philosophers, Windelband's History of Philosophy, Perry's Present Philosophical Tendencies, Hamilton's Lectures on Metaphysics and Logic, and Durant's The Story of Philosophy. Having thus traced the more or less sequential development of philosophic speculation from Thales to James and Bergson, it is now in order to direct the reader's attention to the elements leading to and the circumstances attendant upon the genesis of philosophic thinking. Although the Hellenes proved themselves peculiarly responsive to the disciplines of philosophy, the science of sciences should not be considered indigenous to them. Although some of the Grecians, writes Thomas Stanley, have challenged to their nation the original of philosophy, yet the more learned of them have acknowledged it to be derived from the East. The magnificent institutions of Hindu, Chaldean, and Egyptian learning must be recognized as the actual source of Greek wisdom. The last was patterned after the shadow cast by the sanctuaries of Elora, and Memphis upon the thought substance of primitive people. Thales, Pythagoras, and Plato, in their philosophic wanderings, contacted many distant cults and brought back the lore of Egypt and the inscrutable Orient. From indisputable facts such as these, it is evident that philosophy emerged from the religious mysteries of antiquity, not being separated from religion until after the decay of the mysteries. Hence, he who would fathom the depths of philosophic thought must familiarize himself with the teachings of those initiated priests designated as the first custodians of divine revelation. The mysteries claim to be the guardians of the transcendental knowledge so profound as to be incomprehensible save to the most exalted intellect, and so potent as to be revealed with safety only to those in whom personal ambition was dead and who had consecrated their lives to the unselfish service of humanity. Both the dignity of these sacred institutions and the validity of their claim to possession of universal wisdom are attested by the most illustrious philosophers of antiquity, who were themselves initiated into the profundities of the secret doctrine and who bore witness to its efficacy. I had to take a drink of coffee. The questions may legitimately be propounded. If these ancient mystical institutions were of such great pith and moment, why is so little information now available concerning them and the arcana they claim to possess? The answer is simple enough. The mysteries were secret societies, binding their initiates to inviolable secrecy and avenging with death the betrayal of their sacred trusts. Although these schools were the true inspiration of the various doctrines promulgated by the ancient philosophers, the fountainhead of those doctrines was never revealed to the profane. Furthermore, in the lapse of time, the teaching became so inextricably linked with the names of their disseminators that the actual but recondite source, the mysteries, came to be wholly ignored. Symbolism is the language of the mysteries. In fact, it is the language not only of mysticism and philosophy, but of all nature, where every law and power active in universal procedure is manifested to the limited sense perceptions of man through the medium of symbol. Every form existing in a diversified sphere of being is symbolic of the divine activity by which it is produced. By symbols, men have ever sought to communicate to each other those thoughts which transcend the limitations of language, rejecting man-conceived dialects as inadequate and untrustworthy to perpetuate divine ideas. The mysteries thus chose symbolism as a far more ingenious and ideal method of preserving their transcendental knowledge. In a single figure, a symbol may both reveal and conceal, for to the wise the subject of the symbol is obvious, while to the ignorant the figure remains inscrutable. Hence, he who seeks to unveil the secret doctrine of antiquity must search for that doctrine not upon the open pages of books which might fall into the hands of the unworthy, but in the place where it was originally concealed. Far-sighted were the initiates of antiquity. They realized that nations come and go, that empires rise and fall, and that the golden ages of art, science, and idealism are succeeded by the dark ages of superstition. With the needs of posterity foremost in mind, the sages of old went to inconceivable extremes to make certain that their knowledge should be preserved. They engraved it upon the face of mountains and concealed it within the measurements of colossal images, each of which was a geometric marvel. Their knowledge of chemistry and mathematics they hid within mythologies which the ignorant would perpetuate, or in the spans and arches of their temples which time has not entirely obliterated. They wrote in characters that neither the vandalism of men nor the ruthlessness of the elements could completely efface. Today, men gaze with awe and reverence upon the mighty Memnon's standing alone on the sands of Egypt, or upon the strange Terence pyramids of Palenque. Mute testimonies, these are of the lost arts and sciences of antiquity, and concealed this wisdom must remain until this race has learned to read the universal language, symbolism. The book to which this is the introduction is dedicated to the proposition that concealed within the embryonic figures, allegories, and rituals of the ancients is a secret doctrine concerning the inner mysteries of life, which doctrine has been preserved in toto among a small band of initiated minds since the beginning of the world. Departing, these illumined philosophers left their formula that others, too, might attain to understanding. But, lest these secret processes fall into uncultured hands and be perverted, the great arcanum was always concealed in symbol or allegory, and those who can today discover its lost keys may open with them a treasure house of philosophic, scientific, and religious truths.